Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Dublin City University. My name is Darragh Keogh, and I have the honour of being president of the university. It's my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon. It's a beautiful afternoon here in Dublin. We have a magnificent park outside my window here. My only regret is that you're not here in person to give you a warm Irish welcome at Céad Míle Fáilte Romhaibh. I hope that you're keeping safe and that all your loved ones are, as we move forward, hopefully, to this final stage of the pandemic. As we speak, our facilities here are being adapted as a mass vaccination centre, an indication, I think, of the commitment of our university to scholarship and as a publicly funded institution to the public good. It's wonderful to have people here this afternoon. We have a really wonderful representation of society and civil society here. I'm glad to see we have wonderful diversity. We have diplomats, politicians, prelates, students and scholars, citizens who have joined us this afternoon for this discussion with our keynote speakers, our friend at DCU, Enrico Letta, and Alex Stubb. I'm also very pleased to see in the room as we speak here, former Taoiseach. I can see our kind of local boy, Bertie Ahern. Good afternoon, Bertie. It's great to see you here. And John Bruton, of course, who was Taoiseach and served as EU ambassador to the United States. I'm not sure what the collective term for former prime ministers is. I know Margaret Thatcher had an unkind one. I'm not sure what it is, but we are fortunate, and I know that they will bring great richness to our discussion this afternoon. I'd also like to welcome here in the room Mr. Pat Cox, who is the former president of the European Parliament. So you're very welcome, Pat. As we say in Irish, Céad Míle Fáilte Road, 100,000 welcomes. I wish you were here in person, but just to extend out that welcome to future events here at the university. We're launching this important monograph this afternoon, Brexit and the Future of Europe, written by our prodigious colleague, Professor Federico Fabbrini, who's the founding director of our Brexit Institute here. It's published by Oxford University Press. And the big bet, of course, is at the end of this year whether Oxford will look to the discovery of the vaccine or the publication of Brexit and the future of Europe in terms of their KPIs. But congratulations, Federico. The publication is very welcome to us in terms of scholarship, but we also see it as really a reflection of the strengths that the university has built up in the area of European law and policy on the island of Ireland and beyond. We obviously have the Brexit Institute, which was the first institution of its kind in Europe to study Brexit and its implications. The Brexit Institute also hosts the prestigious Jean Monnet funded Bridge Network project. And again, as you'll have seen in the clip at the beginning, our Masters in European Law and Policy has established a reputation in a short number of years. Of course, a lot of the energy of the Institute comes from Federico, who is tireless, as I say, tireless, prodigious and unflappable. As I say, he's founding director of the Institute and was awarded last year with the Charlemagne Prize in recognition of his scholarship on the future of Europe. The timing is obviously critical for us. It marks the end of Britain's transition period, the new EU-UK relationships and the hiccup or the speed bump that we hit this week, and of course the imminent launch of the conference on the future of Europe. This is important timing, and Federico engages with some of the big questions and the badly needed reflection on the future of the European integration project. He's delayed. It's critical that we look at this, and we're reminded of Jean Monnet's phrase that people only accept change when they're faced with necessity and only recognize necessity when a crisis is upon them. Somebody said to me once, there are two things that people don't like in life: change and the way things are. And this is an important junction for us now to reflect on Europe as we move forward. So we'll have a lot to debate this afternoon. We're very fortunate, and just to acknowledge the presence of our keynote speakers and giving the time for this debate. Alex Stubb has a PhD in European politics from the London School of Economics, and he's now director of the School of Transnational Governance at the European University in Firenze. So you're very welcome, Alex. and again to welcome back to the Institute Enrico Letta, who's a PhD in European law from the Santa Ana School of Advanced Studies and is now Dean of International Affairs at Sciences Po. And together they'll offer perspectives from the Mediterranean and the north of Europe. So it's wonderful to have you. So again, Federico, congratulations on the publication. We look forward to this discussion. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to a great colleague of the Brexit Institute, Shona Murray, who's Europe correspondent with Euronews. And of course, Shona has herself a very strong background in international law. So Shona, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Dara, and welcome everyone to another fantastic discussion at the DCU Brexit Institute, and congratulations to Federico as well. I'll just get straight into it almost, but I want to just go through a couple of housekeeping things. We're recording this, just want to let everybody know, but also we will have time for a few questions after our keynote speakers. So please send through your questions in the chat, or we may be able to hopefully come to you to put your questions to the panel as well. So please do, because we want a lot of dialogue as much as possible. We're going to keep things to around 1 hour as well, so we keep those questions kind of short. But without further ado, I'd like to hear from Enrico Letta, former Prime Minister of Italy and Dean of the School of International Affairs at Sciences Po.
Thank you very much. First of all, it's a great pleasure. I always have a fantastic souvenir of my first presence at Brexit Institute in Dublin. It was 3 years ago, 4 years ago maybe. It was fantastic. It is fantastic to see the achievements and the improvements, thanks to Federico, of course. I think it's fantastic what you are doing and what you achieved altogether. And thank you, Dare, for your leadership. I'm very happy for this discussion, this conversation with Alex. I think maybe we are in the middle of a journey, because next step will be when I will be Dean in Helsinki, because I'm Tuscan. Alex is in Tuscany today, and I'm looking forward to being Helsinki Dean somewhere or in some time. The book is a very useful one. I'll try to say a few words, very short points. First point, I like the book because of the link between Brexit and the future of Europe, because I think there was a sort of underestimation of the impact of Brexit for the future of Europe. And I think this impact is enormous for some negative aspects and also for some positive aspects. And now maybe it's time to underline those positive aspects of this link, because maybe stop crying. We were crying maybe too much because of Brexit, but I think we have to be very pragmatic and realistic. It did happen. Now it's important to have a future towards us. And when I say future, I start by saying that I always think that Brexit and the 4 years after Brexit and the last negotiations showed, first of all, how big and how important is solidarity among member states. And I think Ireland deserved this solidarity from the rest of Europe and the rest of European countries. And it is a big signal for all the European countries to be sure that we are in a union where stronger together and where you're not alone. You are not alone whether you are Germany, you're not alone whether you are Malta or Italy or Ireland. And I think it was a very big signal, a very important signal. My second point is about the fact that Brexit can be an improvement for the future of Europe. I was saying that stop crying, and I would like just to underline one point. I think Next Generation EU is the most revolutionary achievement in the European history after the Euro and the enlargement. And Next Generation EU was approved also because of Brexit. It would have been impossible to get such an enormous and ambitious result with Boris Johnson at the table. I'm sorry if I'm a little bit rude on this point, but I have to be very clear on these topics. We reached such a success because the UK was not on board anymore. It would have been impossible to get this result, both in terms of dimension and in terms of quality, in terms of modernization of tools. And we did it because there was a unity, or there was not such a disunity among member states. It would have been impossible with the UK on board, I think. And now, of course, we have to implement it. It's not easy. It is a very divisive topic, the way in which we can implement it. But it is the future of Europe depends on the way in which all the member states will implement a recovery plan, Next Generation EU. I know what I mean, because what is happening in my country in these very hours, it is exactly because of Next Generation EU. The request Mario Draghi to lead the government is because of Next Generation EU, is because of the big challenge of Next Generation EU that is needing someone like Mario Draghi to do it. So I think this is crucial, and this is also because of Brexit, of course, with all the problems that I mentioned. And my third and final point is about the Conference on the Future of Europe. The book, Federico's book, is very good on this point. The final chapter is all dedicated to the conference, and we are lucky because of our today's meeting is very timely. You know very well that yesterday Coreper approved and a very important step. And we have now, if I may say, the toolbox, or we have now the track for the journey. And maybe the timeline is the correct one. Maybe May the 9th will be the true starting point. The Portuguese presidency is working very hard to make it happening. I think the compromise and the agreements that they get at the level of the Council, the Parliament, and the Commission, of course, is a compromise. So as all the compromises, it could be good, it could be better, but I think it was good to start. Now we have to move in some directions, and we have, in my view, and I mentioned some of the topics of the book, now we have to be very good in not wasting this great opportunity. We have to be very good in having the good balance between expectations and delivery. The risk of frustrations is very high in this kind of topics. I think we have to adjust something. I'm very happy with the paper and with the decisions of the Coreper yesterday. I have one point that I dislike very much. That is the final point of the conference. I don't think that considering the European Council as the center of the European institutional life is a correct decision. And the paper yesterday approved, and the previous paper is considering the European Council as the center. And I think there's a triangle at the European level, and this triangle has to be preserved. So I don't see the European Council at the top, even where I was member of the European Council. I never considered the European Council as the number one of the institutions. And I think some of the problems in the last 10 years were as consequences of the fact that the European Council was considered the leader of the European institutions. So I think this is one point. The other main point is it is not so clear how citizens will be involved in the conference, and we have to keep very high the level of involvement of students. We are with some students around Europe, we are launching some initiatives. The name is Budapest European Agora, is keeping together students coming from some universities, coming from the Jacques Delors Institute initiatives, coming from the Scuola di Politica in Italy. It is just one example of many activities are taking place at youth level, and we have to consider that this protagonism is absolutely necessary for the result and the future of the conference. So I stop here. I am sure that this debate can help raising attention to the on the conference and having better results. And I'm sure that the book and Federico's book can be a fantastic boost because of the link between Brexit and the changes, and because of this final chapter on the conference on the future of Europe. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Enrico. I think people will be quite heartened to see that you find something optimistic about Brexit at the moment. I think it's very difficult to see through the complications and the sort of division so far, but certainly it's something we'll reflect on in a little while. Our second panelist, of course, is Alex Stubb, former Prime Minister of Finland and the Director of the School of Transnational Governance at the European University Institute. Alex.
Thank you very much, Shona, and good afternoon to you, and good evening, I guess, to me. I'll reveal to you that I'm not in Flores at the moment. You'll see it from this view of our backyard here in Helsinki. So we've got about 60 centimeters of snow and minus 10 degrees. So it's nice to be indoors. Dara made a very good comment about former prime ministers, and it's obviously a great privilege to be here with Enrico and also to see Bertie Ahern and John Bruton on the screen. It reminds me of a little anecdote. I ended up being in politics for 12 years, and 8 of those years were in government. When I left politics, I went to the European Investment Bank. Andrew McDougall was my Irish colleague over there, who is very well known amongst all of you. And then once we went to one of these sort of European summits, and Theresa May was still prime minister. And I made my standard joke to my old colleagues, and I said, do you guys know what the best working title in the world is? And sort of everyone looked around, including Theresa May. And I said, well, it's former prime minister, because you don't have to take the crap anymore, but you've done it. And of course, I realized that, well, perhaps Theresa May's position as prime minister at the time wasn't very solid, but she did put up a courageous smile. Very nice to be with all of you. Just to throw you 3 personalities who meant a lot to me from Ireland. Bridget Laffan was my professor at the College of Europe in Bruges, and subsequently I taught with her later on, and now I'm together with her at the EUI. Simon Coveney, we started as members of the European Parliament exactly on the same day. And when I became foreign minister, there was someone called Michael Martin, who was foreign minister at the time. So a lot of wonderful connections. And I do feel that, you know, Finland comes from the northeastern corner of Europe, and we're very similar to the United Kingdom. Both of us have to live with a threatening neighbor to the east, right? Wasn't it like that? Anyway, what I'll do today is basically say a few words on the book. That's point number 1, and point number 2, throw out a few ideas on the conference on the future of Europe. Just to give you a little bit of a caveat, I am an institutional nerd. I've been involved in all the recent intergovernmental conferences, albeit as a civil servant. I negotiated for the Finnish team Amsterdam negotiations, by the way, Bobby McDonough's good old book about original sin in a brave new world here. Then I negotiated Nice, I negotiated the convention and the Lisbon Treaty. So I get very excited when I see a debate about the future of the European Union. And that is also the reason I got very excited about Federico's book. And as was mentioned earlier, I do congratulate you on your productivity. I like the book a lot, and I'll make my first comment about it. I think it's the first one that actually, much like Enrico said, brings in the future of Europe from the perspective of Brexit. And there are many things that we can say about it. I myself am actually married to a Brit who now is a dual national. My children have dual nationality. In many ways, it makes me happy because 75% of our family is in NATO, so I feel secure. Nevertheless, Brexit was a travesty, I think, for our family, not only in the UK, but over here as well. I think it's probably the most stupid thing a nation state has done in recent history. But as Enrico said, we have to live with it and we have to move on. There are good things and bad things about Brexit. Bad things first, I think we lost a country that was very supportive of the internal market, of free trade, of economic reform. So I would say pretty much up the alley of countries like Ireland and Finland, for instance, perhaps Sweden to a certain extent. At the same time, I must say that sometimes I think Britain was put into an anti-European light for the wrong reasons. I give the example, I'm exaggerating a little bit. If you judge pro-European versus anti-European on the basis of, say, free movement of goods, services, money, and even free movement of people, actually Britain was rather pro-European. Remember in 2004, who opened up their borders for Eastern and Central European workers? Well, it was the United Kingdom. And who closed them? Well, the Polish plumber was a bit of a scare in France, if you know what I mean. Debate on the Services Directive. Who was in the front on that one? Well, the United Kingdom was. And when it came to free movement of goods, same thing. Okay, they didn't join the euro, so free movement of money wasn't that big of an issue. But the bottom line is that sometimes the UK, I think, was perceived wrongly to be negative in rhetoric, but actually quite positive in practice. And we can't say exactly the same thing of other member states. I fully agree with Enrico. I don't think we would have had Next Generation EU and the Rescue and Recovery Fund of 750 billion euros if the United Kingdom had been in. Or then they would have somehow come up with a way to dilute it or get out of it. So in that sense, I think a silver lining with Brexit. What I like in the book is right here in the beginning, we see Federico saying that there are sort of three increasingly competing models. First, he says that he sees an EU as a polity which requires solidarity, communion of efforts toward a shared destiny. I call it solidarity union. The second one he calls a market union, enhanced through commerce. So that's kind of the UK thing. And thirdly, he sees what I call a nationalistic union. So you have solidarity, market, and nationalism. I would argue that actually at all times we see all of these three things inside the European Union, and that's just a reality. And I would add to that I like the idea that he puts forward about a political compact, which I'm sure he's going to be able to expand during the conversation as well. Let me then give you, as a second point, a few ideas about how I see things going forward. First of all, the conference on the future of Europe. I also read the document that was approved by Coreper yesterday. It's a fairly classic document. You could say that the conference on the future of Europe is some kind of a hybrid between the reflection group, which prepared Amsterdam, or the group of wise persons, which prepared Nice, or the Constitutional Convention, which prepared the Lisbon Treaty. Well, for obvious reasons, it ended up being the Lisbon Treaty. So it's an interesting hybrid, but to a certain extent, there's also a lot of this sort of institutional navel gazing here. Just the fact that we couldn't come up with the name of one president for the conference, and you're going to have someone, president of the European Parliament, president of not the European Council but the presidency, and then the president or someone from the European Commission. It's a classic European compromise. I also find the document a little bit too rich on this term citizen. I mean, I love citizens, we all are, but there's this sort of, you know, third person type of use of citizen where somehow the document puts itself above European citizens. And I always find that a little bit patronizing and not a big fan of it. What do I expect from the Conference of the Future of Europe? Well, I hope we don't get into the classic institutional fights. And that's why I'm quite glad that it's actually focused more on the policy side. There's a lot about climate, there's a lot about digital, actually a lot about health as well. I think COVID-19 might be mentioned 3 or 4 times in the document. And I think that's good, you know, focus on the substance. The problem, if you go into institutions, it's always a power struggle. Number one, between the member states, big and small. We saw that in Nice, and you know, Ireland saw it in a referendum as well. A number of commissioners, just to remind you. And then secondly, it's a power struggle between the institutions. So Parliament, Commission, Council. And number 3, it's a power struggle between Brussels and the member states and competence. And it gets a bit complicated. So my final point on this is to say, I think we need to forget the debate about a finalité politique. You know, I can come out of the closet. If it was up to me, Europe would be a federation of sorts. Fine. I think a decentralized federation would be the greatest solution, but it ain't going to happen. So let's stop talking about a finalité. Bridget Laffan always taught me, listen, Alex, the European Union is more than an international organization, less than a state. And that's what it's going to continue to be. So we need to sort of stop to think about the European Union as some kind of a utopia, sort of final phase of integration. It's not going to happen. I hate to say this, but I'll say it very bluntly. Europe is basically a process, and that process has always 3 phases. Phase number 1, crisis. Phase number 2, chaos. And phase number 3, suboptimal solution. And I'm afraid that's what we're going to have to live with at the end of the day. I'm sure that Federico at least might agree with a little bit part of that. In any case, I think it's a wonderful book, a good contribution to the debate on the future of Europe. This is the process that we need at the moment.
Thanks very much, Alex. And it's interesting that both of you agree that with the UK in the EU, the next generation EU wouldn't have happened. I think that's one thing we should come back to. But I might just start on the questions. And by the way, please do send in your questions to the chat. And if anybody wishes to maybe speak or put the questions to the panelists, then please do so as well. Bertie Ahern or John Bruton, if you wish to do that, that would be obviously most welcome. But Enrico, I wouldn't mind just starting with you, because you were talking about the solidarity that Ireland received throughout the Brexit process, and I think everybody is extremely grateful for that. But nonetheless, last Friday, when we saw the terrible mistake, the inadvertent or the triggering of Article 16 of the withdrawal agreement, I think, judging by the reaction in the UK and in Ireland and so on, there is a few jitters around how long-term that solidarity is, or in the future, would Ireland feel that the EU could move like that again? What was your interpretation of what happened last Friday and how it happened? Because it's the Irish border is something that has dominated the EU for 4 or 5 years now.
I think it was a mistake. I think it was a huge mistake, and I think it's a mistake that can have also very tough consequences in terms of creating some anxieties for the future, or trying to have a misinterpretation of this general subject that we both mentioned as solidarity, as and stronger together as the main mantra and the main way in which we think that being within the European Union is better than being out. So I'm sure, I'm pretty sure that there will be some changes, and I'm sure that this topic will be treated as a mistake. What I want to say is that it is very important to be clear in the messages on this point, and to continue to be on the same line that we had during the Michel Barnier period. Because in this period, for all the 4 years, there was a strong solidarity among the member states, transparency, all discussions together. And I think it was great. And it was the way in which we keep a unity among member states having different relationship with the UK. Alex mentioned some of these differences. It was clear that countries like the Netherlands or Sweden or Denmark was always close to the UK in all the different opting out issues and many negotiations. So I can feel the problem that they are having. And I think the big success of Michel Barnier was to keep all together and to be together. And I think it is the key topic now today. So this is why we have to overcome this obstacle as fast as possible.
Alex, do you want to come in there about, what happened on Friday, the future of the protocol? Do you see it as workable? Do you think that, Ireland's had a lot of attention and support over the past 4 or 5 years? Do you think that that can continue? I mean, there are probably member states who are sick of hearing about the Northern Irish border, particularly because so many other issues that the EU has been concerned with, have been allowed to almost fester because everybody's been concerned about Brexit.
Sure, I think we should be looking at it from both sides of the border and both sides of the channel, if you will. And by that, I mean, first of all, I fully agree with Enrico. I think it was a grave mistake by the European Commission, and things went from bad to worse when blame was put on another commissioner, not the president of the European Commission herself. I think it was a very hasty decision. I think it was done in a very small group, and once it came out, I mean, within half an hour, I knew this is gonna, all hell is gonna break loose. I would like to personally thank the Irish government for hitting the phones immediately and basically making the point, what the hell is this? Because a lot of people looked at it not necessarily directly from the perspective of Article 16 and the issue of a hard border, but they looked at this as a principal question. Why should the European Union basically take a decision which slaps in the face of everything that it stands for? Not least solidarity, not least free movement of goods, and not least an understanding that this pandemic is transnational by definition, beyond border, and therefore requires transnational and global solutions. I'm glad they withdrew it, and it was quite interesting to see, if I may say so. Looked like the island of Ireland was rather united on this particular question across the board. Then, if I may, and I guess I can say this a little bit as an academic, and I will not take any further journalistic questions on this, but if I was Boris Johnson at this particular moment, and I would be looking at the ramifications of Brexit in the long run, I personally think it can go only in two directions. One is the dismantling of the United Kingdom, or of Great Britain as we know it, which will have ramifications and implications on obviously the status of Northern Ireland, but also the status of Scotland. Or the United Kingdom will make a comeback to membership in the European Union in 10 years. So if I was Irish at the moment, I would lay cool, see how things develop, and make sure that the type of a mess that happened from last Thursday evening to Friday evening doesn't happen again, and have another conversation with the European Commission why it happened in the first place.
Well, just before I bring Bertie Ahern in, but Alex, I mean, because you're in the EPP, I mean, how was it though that Ursula?
No, I'm at the EUI.
No, right, but you were in the EPP, no?
Yes, but I'm a professor. I'm a professor and director.
Sure.
And as I said,
okay.
I said former prime minister. So your question is.
But anyway, about Ursula von der Leyen, though, I mean, she's president of the European Commission. How was it that she was able to pass this invocation of Article 16, seeing as she's, stood over the withdrawal agreement and, was really quite strong against Boris Johnson recently.
Yeah, listen, mistakes happen. I think give credit where credit is due and be critical when it's necessary. When the European Commission takes on more powers and more important tasks, as it did in the Rescue and Recovery Fund, 750 billion, as it has done in negotiating the vaccines, as it has done in negotiating Brexit. I think it did a stellar job. I think Ursula von der Leyen has actually been a great president of the European Commission. This was her first major screw up. She changed that very quickly. She made a U-turn in 24 hours. And on top of that, went for not only a charm offensive back to Ireland and the United Kingdom, essentially not apologizing, but you know what I mean. And then finally having a video conference with the big pharmaceutical companies on Sunday and rectifying the problem. So, this is what you get when you are in a top position, and it's fully understandable. And the European Commission simply has to tolerate it. Again, they've done a great job. Final point on this. I think the pandemic and the management thereof, economic, social, and political, it will mutate just like the virus itself. We're going to have more of these crises coming along.
Okay, and another former Prime Minister, former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern, I think is there. It's a former Prime Minister's Club. Do we have them open? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, Shauna, just very, very quickly, congratulations to Federico for the book and for all the good work that he's been doing. Just on last Friday, I mean, I don't want to dwell on that because we're only repeating, what Enrico and Alex has said, but and I think we all agree in it. But I think one of the things that worries me about it, and the fallout of it, is Remainers in Northern Ireland who, were very strong about the protocol, very strong about the European Union, very strong about the single market. If we don't correct what was the problem, and I'm not talking about change in the protocol, but the reality is, if you go into Marks and Sparks tonight on the way home from work, or if you're going out for the food, or if you're going into over the weekend into your horticultural shop, the stores are half empty. I'm talking to a businessman from Derry about an hour ago, and this is the reality. So I think that has to be sorted, because what we don't want to do is turn Remainers and strong Europeans anti the whole project because of how an old 47-year rule has changed, and because public opinion can switch very quickly. So I think the European Union made a quick decision last week, but there was a problem, is a problem, and that has to be addressed. So I think these things are not easy to do, but I think that's the immediate thing that I'd like to see over the next, whatever it is, week or so.
So just on making it workable, though, Bertie, first of all, I suppose from an EU point of view, do you think that the EU is maybe being too stringent in terms of the regulatory checks going into the Northern Ireland for the single market, but also looking at the sort of turn that the DUP has taken against it, the 5-point plan, the fact that they are calling for the abolition, maybe the UK doesn't have that appetite. I mean, on those two levels, do you think that the protocol has a strong future, or there are problems ahead?
I think there are, I remember, it's a long time ago, but when I was Minister of Finance back January 93, when all the tariffs and the barriers were going, John will remember this well, but it took a while for things to settle in, and that was inevitably going to be the position. But I just think it's not sensible for regulations and rules to be so tight that people can't, buy straightforward products in it, because Northern Ireland is still in the single market. So you don't want to make it just so regimentation that you can't have free flow of goods. Now, and then the examples about, the military equipment and because the horticultural plants have UK soil on them, you don't want to make it ridiculous. And I know they're being played up, but it is a reality that the stores in the north are about 40% empty, and that just has reverberations back on the ordinary public. And I don't believe that the protocol was designed to do that. And whether it's strict rules by revenue or too strict interpretations, they need to get a handle on that quickly. Of course, it's not helping that the staff aren't there at all for the last 5 days because they're intimidated out of their job. But I think we need the staff back, and we need to try and get on top of it fairly quickly. Otherwise, it'll roll through society.
Just before we go to the questions from people, do you think, Bertie, any of this will impact Ireland's relationship with Europe in terms of there ever being a question of a referendum on Ireland's membership of the EU, given that the UK is our closest neighbour and we export so much to the UK and there's problems with the protocol? Does any of this impact Ireland's membership of the European Union?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I agree with what Alex said a few minutes ago. UK leaving Europe was the daftest decision. And the only one that would surpass that would be us doing it.
Yeah. Okay.
If I may add,
Yeah.
I think the alternative cost for other EU member states is simply too high. I mean, look at a country like Finland, not a NATO member, 1,300 kilometers of border with Russia, 70% of the trade with the EU. It's not worth it. And of course, the mess that the UK has been in the past 4 years, it just proves the case in point.
I'll just move on to questions, but before I do that, I just want to ask Enrico, are you concerned a little bit, though, just before we move on from Article 16, that perhaps there's criticism of Ursula von der Leyen working in a sort of a silo? Is that something that you've heard, that she's maybe not engaging enough with the rest of the Commission or with the member states, and that could be criticism of her presidency of the Commission?
I'm sure. I think, as Alex said, that is the period in which leaders need to be very reactive, very, very reactive. It's a period in which planning is important, but being able to react to what is happening maybe is more important than planning, because if we I think what happened in the last weeks or months, take this problem of vaccine, AstraZeneca, and the problems between the UK and the European Union, the need to change immediately and to have the right decisions in the right time. So I think we are in a period in which leaders, first of all, they need to have around them people, not yes men. That is my big take in this very period. They have to be surrounded, they have to be around them people able to say, hey, look, you are making a mistake. You have to change this position. It is very important to have this capacity today. And I'm sure that what the Commission will do and what Ursula, I'm in Paris now, and the French say she did a sort of sans faute. She did a sans faute. Sans faute means she didn't do any mistake, big mistake, until now in the last 10 months after the pandemic. Now it's a moment in which some mistakes are there, but I think it's possible to overcome them, and it's within the solidarity and the cooperation, it is possible to overcome them.
Cool. We've got a comment in there from Anthony Stain saying, how far can the EU go on health within the limits of the treaty, which kind of brings in, I suppose, the question around how the EU is performing on health overall. First to, again, the vaccine situation. I mean, Alex, the EU seems to be the only one having problems with AstraZeneca. We've heard from the CEO of AstraZeneca that obviously the EU is able to point to the contract as well. But how do you assess the EU's rollout of vaccines, and whether or not that will create confidence in member states to give the EU more competency in the area of health in the future?
Yeah, I think the big question there is about redistributed value. We have to keep in mind in all of this that the size of the budget of the European Union is still rather limited. It is roughly 1% of the GNI of the whole area. And as we all know, because we live in Europe in welfare states, issues such as healthcare and social questions are pretty much in the domain of the nation states. They are the ones who do the fiscal policy, whether it's through taxation or distribution of wealth, and take the full responsibility. What the European Union can do is basically the high politics of health, which includes negotiating vaccine doses in a difficult kind of situation. I have found it rather interesting to see some commentary coming, even from smaller member states, and why did we allow the European Commission to do the negotiations? Well, with my experience, I can tell you that a country like Finland, and with all due respect, a country like Ireland, would have never been able to get the amounts of doses that we did were we to negotiate with the big pharmaceutical companies ourselves. Someone might come back and say, don't give me that negotiations theory on scale. But the truth of the matter is, then we would have had internal vaccine wars between the member states and jostling for different types of dosage. And to be honest, I think the jury is still out. The Commission did a double mistake. The first one was linked to Protocol 16, and the second one was linked to communication in this particular case. But let's look at the big picture and see where we are in the summer in terms of vaccination. The example that I give might be a little bit simplified. Mother-in-law and father-in-law in the United Kingdom, both over 80, got their vaccination 3 weeks ago in the Midlands. My dad and his fiancée, 85 and 81, got their vaccination this week. So if there's a 3-week lag between what happens in Europe versus what happens in the UK, I don't think that's drastic or dramatic. And at the end of the day, the vaccine issue is just one, how would I say, mutation or hybrid form of all of this. Judgment day comes when we start doing the morbid calculation of how many people were infected per capita, how many people died per capita. That's going to be, I hate to say it, the final judgment, and we are nowhere near that yet. If I was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, I would have over 100,000 people dead and a mutation of the virus spreading. I would probably be toning down, how would I say, the nationalism of how I have dealt with the issue, but that's just me.
Yeah, Enrico, on that, I mean, people in Europe are pointing to the UK and, of course, to Israel, as we know, about being much smoother in terms of its rollout. Criticisms that the EU was spent too long negotiating money when now's not a time for that, and that the EMA was too short for its authorization. Do you agree with any of that, or is it a little bit unfair at this point?
It is part of the discourse that is related to the reaction and how to be good in have good reactions. It is clear that today, Alex was very good in the tale of the old generation and what they are doing. All our parents or grandparents, they are all in their mind, the only topic is vaccine today. And the institutions, they have to deliver on that. And it is terrible, I think, for us, if I may say, for us Europeans, if it is so evident that the UK is better performing than us. It gives immediately the signal and the short message, out is better. Out, you perform better. I don't think it is true for many reasons, but the short messages are the strongest messages. And the message on vaccine is a horrible one. And this is why I think we have to recuperate immediately. And we have to change. And I think, if I may say, is the top issue for the Commission in the next weeks. All the rest has to be in a corner. In the next weeks, all the energy, the priorities, they have to be put there. And the priority is 1 vaccine, 2 vaccine, 3 vaccine. We can't allow this message to be spread around Europe. Otherwise, the big risk is to waste all the big credit that we get with the Next Generation EU.
And is that, you think, Enrico, just on that point you made, that it's terrible that, looking at the UK doing so well, is that kind of where we're at with our relationship with the UK? It's kind of zero sum almost. The UK keeps pointing to the EU's lagging behind, and they make claims that if they hadn't left the EU, they would be alongside the rest of us, even though they could have done their own emergency approval themselves within the institution. Is that where we're at with? Because that doesn't bode well, I suppose, for cooperation with Britain.
I'm glad to be a former prime minister, because I'm very free in my in the words that I can use. But the big problem is that our partner and Boris Johnson is someone who is unfair in the way in which his partnership is done with us. And I think that Ursula von der Leyen, Charles Michel, they are fair people. And I think it is a crucial point. And this crucial point needs to have reactions and to be very good in knowing how to treat with unfair people. But it is necessary, because otherwise the result is a very negative one for us. I think we lost in the last 2 weeks a lot. We have to recuperate now.
And Alex, how would you see that recuperating happening? Because we don't really have a steady, access or pathway in terms of our vaccine situation or vaccine strategy right now. I mean, do you think that the EU or the EMA should reach out to Russia about Sputnik, or, is it really just about negotiation with the pharmaceuticals? How does the EU map its way out of this over the next few weeks after a very disastrous couple of weeks?
Yeah, 2 points. The first one actually on the previous question about Boris Johnson and fairness. I agree. Having said that, I think Boris Johnson will do everything in his power to try to make Brexit look as good as possible. And he seized the moment, he seized the opportunity with the vaccine rollout, and actually started before Christmas when we were in a situation whereby they could say that they have approved the vaccines before the European Union has. And he will continue to tout these types of, it's a communications war, and he's going to continue to do that, unfortunately, whether we like it or not. Listen, second point on the Commission, I think they're going to have a very difficult month of February. Because now, and as Enrico said, all they need to do is just focus on the vaccines and do the communication right on the vaccine. And the way in which they can get out of this, and that will not start happening before March, is that they go for a serious rollout program and make the data match the doses. They have to be able, the ECDC is great, the European Center for Disease Control. Remember, a lot of us have been looking at the rates of infections as a median of 2 weeks of 100,000 people. They've been able to show through statistics what is going on in different places. The Commission needs to do exactly the same thing with the vaccine. The only way in which they can get out of this is to show that in March, April, and May, they have gone full throttle with the vaccines. And then they can say, listen, you can see we might have been a little bit slow in the beginning, but at the end of the day, we deliver. I think that's going to be the key here. But one thing is for sure, they cannot do another communication mistake as they did last week.
One of the things that Enrico said at the start, and you said it as well, was that the next generation EU wouldn't have happened if the UK was there. I remember asking Pascal Donoghue about this, and he said it could have happened, it would have happened. We saw countries like the Frugal Four who were dead opposed to it at the start. So why do you think that the UK wouldn't have been in it? And do you think that this is really the only optimistic side to Brexit for the EU?
No, I just have a hard time seeing the silver lining with Brexit, but that's perhaps just me. I'm a little bit subjective. I don't know whether at the end of the day some kind of a deal would. I'm sure it would have. But I think the key here is to understand, and I to say this to an Irish audience is a bit sort of strange. The way in which we have dealt with the COVID crisis versus the way in which we have dealt with the Euro crisis, like day and night. Euro crisis, it was all about austerity. It was to a certain extent all about punishment. It was all about frugality. It was all about North versus South. It was all about distrust. And we felt that we were not in the same boat, which I think was a silly way of approaching. Now, with the pandemic, we have understood from the beginning that we are in the same boat, whether it's from a health perspective, whether it's from an economic perspective. And I think the political leaders understand that from a political perspective, their chairs are shaking at the moment. So that's why the approach has been completely different. So perhaps at the end of the day, the UK would have come along in as well. The show towards the end of the negotiations on the rescue and the recovery fund, I think it happened around August or something like that. It was a classic, you know, the Frugal Four had to do that, but at the end of the day, they knew that they would have to go along with the package.
Before I go into Federico, Enrico, I'll just ask you, do you see Brexit as meaning accelerating, I suppose, the likelihood of a united Ireland? And will the EU stand four square behind that in support of Ireland? Because obviously it would be a very complicated thing to happen. Do you think that the EU will give enough support democratically, politically, financially, and so on?
I think Enrico wants to answer this.
Yes.
Frankly speaking, it would be a dream to have such an outcome, but I know very well that it's a very complicated issue with many difficulties, many problems. So frankly speaking, I need more a bigger toolbox to understand also the correct wording on this topic. So I think we have to be cautious because it's a very sensitive topic. But if I may say, for me personally, it would be a dream to get a United Ireland as a final outcome of everything. And I see, if I'm not wrong, that in rugby it works. So why don't we expand rugby for the rest of life? I know that rugby is important in Ireland, a little bit less important in Italy. We are very bad, if I may say. But I repeat, the correct word for me is a dream. And if the European Union is able to be also the environment where this dream can happen, it can be a fantastic boost also for the European idea.
Okay, well, on that note, another optimistic note, thank you very much for that, Enrico Letta and Alex Stubb. And I'm going to hand you over to the man of the hour, Federico Fabbrini, author of Brexit and the Future of Europe.
Thank you very much, Shona, for giving me the floor. And of course, thank you for moderating. I am really flattered that Alex and Enrico accepted to discuss my book, and I'm humbled and honored that so many colleagues and friends, including Bertie and a number of members of both national parliaments and the European Parliament, are joining us in this afternoon. On a personal level, of course, I am very pleased that my book was of interest, but if you allow me to say so, on a professional level, as the book is very much the outcome of the work I am undertaking as a professor at DCU and the founding director at the Brexit Institute, I am grateful for the conversation we had today, which I think has also identified further avenues for research. I just have maybe a couple of quick final points, and I know I'm not going to do justice to all the threads that were raised in the conversation, but three points on my side. The first is on Brexit, and I think both Alex and Enrico rightly identified sort of the perspective of my book. I really wanted to show how Brexit is a watershed moment for the history of the European Union. And in the past few years, it had occurred to me on a number of occasions when talking across European capitals, how very often the decision of the UK to leave was taken as a sort of a side thing, business as usual, we will manage it. Whereas to me, this is a transformative event. And I think we need to reckon with that and see all its implication. And clearly, now that eventually Brexit has happened, a month and 4 days ago, we start seeing the problems of that, including the fact that my president, Dara, did not get a copy of the book because the land bridge isn't working properly, and customs checks are delaying postal deliveries from the continent to Ireland. So we are only now starting to understand what Brexit means, and hopefully the book sheds light on that. Then the second point is about the Conference on the Future of Europe. And I'm grateful that both Enrico and Alex have focused on it in their remarks. In my view, this is an out-of-the-box initiative which has really major potential to relaunch the project of European integration. It will be a challenging process. I know there are difficulties ahead. I do think, and there perhaps it might be the point of slight disagreement with Alex, in my view, the conference should also look at the institutional issues. Some of the weaknesses we have seen, for example, in the management of vaccines, and are connected with some shortcomings in the EU governance system. But I know this is a complex topic, and my good friend Neil Richmond from the Oireachtas Joint Committee on European Affairs and I have discussed this extensively, and in Ireland there is also caution about pushing toward treaty change. But ultimately, I think precisely because, as Alex said, Europe is a process, we can never stand still. And I think we need to constantly strive towards a more perfect union in that sense. And that takes me to the very third and final point I want to make tonight, which is about the role of education, if you allow me. We are hosting this event at a university. Both Alex and Enrico have PhDs in European politics and European law. They are also leading important academic institutions at UI and Sciences Po. So I know I am speaking to a friendly audience there, but I think one lesson we should take from Brexit is the importance of educating citizenry and educating new generations about Europe. Brexit, to a large extent, was also the result of poor knowledge of what Europe is and what Europe does. And I think we can ill afford that to happen elsewhere. So in my view, it is crucial we continue to invest in training, educating, raising awareness among the young generations on the values and the potential of European integration and the reasons why we are one union. And of course, I know this is very important for our university, for my university, Dublin City University. And I want to thank here my president, Professor Dara Keogh, not only for hosting this event, but really for his leadership on this. And as you know, we are active as an academic establishment. The Brexit Institute was created precisely with that purpose. We've been running in that framework a MOOC, which reached out to 2,000 students across the world on Europe. And we have an important master in European law and policy, which is precisely designed to train people who will work perhaps in the European institution, but simply also become better European citizens by knowing more about Europe. And that is actually consistent with our strategy as a university to transform societies. So with that final note, I can only thank again all the participants and hand back to Dara, who I'm sure will say some final words on behalf of the university.
Thank you very much, Federico. It's been a wonderful discussion. I'm glad to see people interacting, and very grateful to Shona, who took up those questions and fielded them very well. So thank you, Shona. We're very grateful to you. Once again, on behalf of everybody here, we'd like to thank our contributors greatly. Enrico and Alex, thank you for being with us. Thank you to Bertie for that intervention from the floor. As I said at the outset, I'm sorry that we're not here in person. We could move to maybe the finger food and the little Bicarino at this point. Unfortunately, we're separated, but hopefully that doesn't reduce the warmth. Again, on your behalf, I'd like to congratulate Professor Fabbrini. Again, this is I think his 6th volume, is it, with Oxford, Federico? He's nodding away. Six volumes with OUP is something else, and he's only getting warmed up. So listen, stay safe, everybody. Keep washing your hands. Remember where we are, and again, we are a community of knowledge, no matter where we are, and to keep learning together and keep interacting together. But above all, thanks for coming. Stay safe.